Hey, I love Kidmin. It is Ryan Frank, and welcome to the Daily Coffee Chat with Ryan Frank. So glad that you are here. I have got to tell you the truth. I have loved these daily coffee chats. I've gotten a lot of messages in the last little bit about, are you going to continue doing these? Someone asked me yesterday, they're new to the coffee chats. Is this just something special for this week? And I don't know if we'll do this in the perpetuity until the Lord comes back or what, but I've really enjoyed it. Initially, I thought it was going to be something that we were going to do just to jump on Facebook and stay connected during this quarantine and during this pandemic, but I've really enjoyed the conversations, and I'm just thinking we'll keep doing these moving forward is what I'm thinking now. We have been blessed to have a lot of guests online with us. And we've had a lot of the children's ministry community. In fact, tomorrow is just going to be a panel back to back of kids pastors from the I Love Kidmin Facebook group. And I'm going to get some real time updates on what's happening in their ministry. Today, we're going to talk about a very, very crucial topic, and that is racial tension and how as a church, we can be agents of change and hope. We have a very distinguished guest with us, a fellow pastor and ministry leader, Jonathan Banks, who we'll introduce more formally here in just a moment. I do want to remind you, if you have a question or something that you would like to chat about, the phone number is right there. I would love for you to text me your question, 833-792-6372. Yesterday, we have a few text messages from Kidmin folks like yourself saying, have you thought about asking this person to be on the coffee chat or this person? So text me 833-792-6372 if you have a question. We are live on the Ryan Frank Facebook page, also live in the I Love Kidmin Facebook group. It's good to see Catherine is here and Dana is here looking down at my phone. Elise, Esther Moreno is here. What's up, Esther? High five. Catherine Wagner, David Knight, who I'll be talking to here in a little bit once this coffee chat wraps up. Good to see you, David. Brianna Elkins is here. So glad that you are with us today for this topic. Sometimes tragedies like this, Ahmoud Arbery tragedy, they happen in the world, and we don't discuss them a whole lot in the children's ministry community or often in the church at large. I really have felt, Beth and I have felt, in fact, she's the one that the other day said, Ryan, I really think that this is a coffee chat in a discussion that the children's ministry community should be having, and I cannot agree more. I've asked Jonathan Banks to join me today. Jonathan is an author. He is a speaker. I asked Jonathan to come and speak at MegaCon last year. I'm a trustee at Indiana Wesleyan University, which is about a stone throw away from here. And Jonathan spoke a year or two back at Indiana Wesleyan University's graduation. He is a distinguished speaker. He is a licensed pastor, minister, and he loves the children's ministry community. So I'm blessed to have Jonathan here with us today. Jonathan, thank you for joining us. We're going to talk about a topic that is not fun to talk about. It's not easy. I would say it's not easy to talk about, but boy, it is so important to talk about. But before we jump into the topic, Jonathan, good morning. Thank you for joining us from the windy city of Chicago.
Great day, Ryan. Glad to be here. Good morning to all of the kids ministry nation and to pastors all over the country and our world.
Yeah, now, Jonathan, is Chicago home for you?
It is for the past 24 years. So love the windy city, love Chicago, love the Midwest.
Now, here's the thing. What about that Garrett's popcorn? Do you ever get downtown to get any of that Garrett's popcorn?
I have enjoyed Garrett's popcorn.
I shouldn't say do you ever get downtown, because your church is about downtown, isn't it?
We're a little south of Chicago, but there are Garrett's popcorn everywhere.
Are there? Okay.
I am a big fan of Chicago, all things Chicago, even the White Sox and the Cubs, go figure. But that's also because I wasn't born here. So it's a little easier for me to kind of enjoy the entire city.
So where were you born at?
Right outside of Philadelphia.
Were you really? Okay. And what brought you to Chicago?
The Lord brought me to Purdue University, West Lafayette, Indiana.
Oh, yeah.
Where God blessed me to come to Christ at 18. And of course, that was followed by just a great journey of faith, working on a campus ministry, working with youth around the country, then begin to recruiting at college campuses all around the country for a major food organization that I was working for. And we've been in full-time ministry for the past 11 years.
I love it. I love it. And I didn't realize, or maybe you had told me before, but if you did, I forgot that you went to Purdue. So I've got a brother-in-law, a sister-in-law, several family members that are graduates of Purdue University.
Yeah.
And
boilers, boiler up.
boiler up. Jonathan, you've also written a book that I talk a lot about, and I've recommended it to a lot of parents. And I don't know if you've got a copy with you or not, but will you at least tell us about the book if you don't have one close by?
I do. Raise Your GPA is the book that I authored.
Okay.
Interestingly enough, it will touch on a little bit of what we're talking about today. And it was just about preparing young people to live life in all its fullness, life academically, life spiritually. And it really prepares young people to walk in their God-given destiny, having a hunger for God's way of life. And of course, the book Raise Your GPA stands for your grade point average. We want our young people to achieve academically, but it also stands for their God point average, helping them achieve a great relationship with Jesus Christ. So Raise Your GPA helps young people do that. The proof kind of is in the Banks household. Both of my sons were 4.0 students, AP and honors courses. We're talking about ethnicity today. We're talking about race. They were one part of the valedictorian pool at their schools, and the first African-American male valedictorians that most teachers and administrators could remember. Not because my sons are any smarter or more gifted than anyone else, but life is all about preparation. And that's what Raise Your GPA does for youth leaders, families, and for teens, tweens, and young adults. So
I love it. Thanks for mentioning it. It's a great book. I have a copy of it. Beth and I have a copy at home. So Jonathan, I reached out to you the other day and said that we want to do a coffee chat. In light of the recent tragedy in Georgia with Ahmoud Arbery, who was killed. It took 70 some days for the suspects to be charged once a video surfaced. Very tragic, and it's brought up a lot of conversations again in the country and in the media around racial tension. Let me ask you, do you feel like racial tension is an issue that even as kids pastors and ministry leaders that kids are dealing with?
Kids are definitely dealing with racial tensions. Now, I gave you a little bit of my background earlier. I mentioned that I came to Christ at 18. But what some of your viewers may not know is that I am bi-ethnic. So my mother's white, first generation German Jew born in this country. Her parents fled Hitler in the late 30s, and my mother was born in this country. My father is from a small town that before GPS and Apple Maps and Google Maps, you couldn't find Pelham, Georgia on a map. I could never find it. So it's not real far from Brunswick, Georgia, where Ahmoud was killed. So I have a kind of a unique perspective being bi-ethnic. I don't typically use the word race that often unless I'm addressing larger national crowds, because it's a term that's well understood. But I think that it continues to kind of force the divide between ethnicities. I share oftentimes that I really wholeheartedly believe Acts chapter 17, where Paul writes, from one man, God created all the nations throughout the whole earth. King James Version says of one blood. So this concept of that there are different races of humans only sometimes amplifies our God-given diversity and our God-given differences that add to the wonderful palette of humanity. But there's, of course, we know genetically so much more that unites us and divides us. We're 99% genetically similar, but sometimes we try to magnify these differences in race and ethnicity. So is it an issue for youth pastors? 100%, because you're dealing with either the effects of racism, or you're dealing with sometimes the absence of that tension, but knowing that as our youth progress into society, we want them to be champions for Christ, champions for the kingdom, they've got to address these issues of justice, ethnicity, and being really a champion for all.
Yeah. So sometimes we see it with adults, and I hate it that this tension existed. I think we all as believers hate this.
Sure.
We sometimes see it manifested with adults, like with this Ahmoud killing. But how do we see it manifested like with kids, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10-year-old kids? Any thoughts on that?
Definitely. If you think about it, in the majority of our churches, even whether it's school or not, typically there are ethnicities that are in the minority. So when people, maybe they're African American, maybe they're Asian American, maybe Hispanic, when they're invited sometimes to broader majority white congregations, they are celebrated as long as culturally they adapt to the majority, whether it's school, could be worship style, could be speaking style, preaching style. Ethnicities are always welcome, but diversity in expression of our culture, our worship, our music is very rarely celebrated, except on sometimes Black History Month or Hispanic History Month or Women's Day. We have days that we sometimes relegate to the celebration and appreciation of different cultures. But oftentimes ethnicities and cultures are not welcome unless they conform to the dominant culture.
Yeah. That I think that makes a lot of sense.
So if you have a young African American that comes to your worship service, if you happen to be a majority white congregation, there's not always the feelings of acceptance, that there's sometimes a feeling of insecurity. So especially during this COVID-19 response, we're talking about food insecurity, healthcare insecurity, but oftentimes a young minority child will feel a safety insecurity. Am I welcome? Am I going to be ridiculed? Am I going to be bullied? And there are fears that are on the minds of parents of ethnic children, by ethnic children, and different things, that these fears are there, that as youth pastors, you can help reduce those fears if you can kind of affirm that young person, make sure that you welcome them and celebrate them for who they are, not for just fitting into your normal youth programming.
Yeah, boy, you're right. And I think if there's anywhere, and unfortunately, I think it's the exception, not the rule, but if there's anywhere that it ought to be manifested of different ethnicities and races coming together, it is in the local church. But you often don't see that, do you? Very few, I think, churches are really, really intentional about, we really want to be a multi-ethnic church, and we want it to be so visible from the stage to the pew to the outreach. But it is such a breath of fresh air when you do see that. But it is rare, isn't it?
It is. And sometimes, we love to amplify the fact that we say that Sunday morning is the most segregated time in America. But think about that. If you are typically experiencing an insecure feeling, you don't feel safe, you don't feel welcomed, you don't feel celebrated. When it comes to your time of intimate worship, fellowship, communion, that the koinonia, the community that we're talking about, if you have the opportunity to really feel celebrated, why wouldn't you do that? So sometimes we fault people for not being more diverse on Sunday, but sometimes we're just looking for that sense of safety and security. And one of the things that's kind of interesting, think about 9/11 when it happened. All of a sudden, fire companies from around the country sent engines and sent people to help at 9/11 in New York. Wouldn't it be something if, when the lockdown is lifted, if people from different ethnicities came to African American churches to say, we stand in solidarity with you? That is the type of demonstration that we can kind of all celebrate and be a champion for. Oftentimes we want others to come to us that are hurting. That was never Jesus's modus of operandi. You know, he always went to where the hurting was. He went to where the hurt was. The Bible says that the reason that Jesus can be our high priest and a master intercessor for us is because he was touched in all points just like we were. He felt what we felt. And you can't even begin to imagine what certain communities feel when it comes to fear and when it comes to just worrying about your general safety. Can I share a quick story with you, Ryan?
Please, please.
In October of 2019, I had just finished the Chicago Marathon. And I'm not one that just loves to run, but I was kind of in that running zone. I was in a ministry assignment in Brunswick, Georgia, the same Brunswick where Ahmaud was killed a few months later. It was about 10:30 at night, and I just wanted to go out for a run. Now, in my community here outside of Chicago, I feel a little bit more welcomed and safe, but it's not always the best to go running at 10:30 at night. But, you know, I figure, well, God is with me, you know, who knows, let's just go for a quick run. I stayed around the hotel area. But then to see less than 4 months later, this young man's life that was snuffed out in the exact same town, doing the exact same activity, and understanding that could have very easily have been me, robbing my family of my presence, robbing my community of, you know, my life, even though I'm one person. But in the hearts of most African Americans in this country, Ahmaud is not just his mother's son, he's all of our sons. So every time this incident happens, there is a fear that grips us. As I was praying about our call today, I thought about Hebrews chapter 11, where it says that faith is the substance of things hoped for. When these incidents happen, our hope gets reduced. So in fact, sometimes our manifested faith gets reduced, from the 5-year-old to the 10-year-old to the 15-year-old. And as a youth pastor, if you don't think it's affecting your young people, you're sadly mistaken, and you're missing the opportunity to bring reconciliation to all of your young people, but especially those that are hurting and are scared.
Yeah. Let's shift gears a little bit.
Yeah.
And let's talk about what we can do as children's pastors, youth leaders, to really help kids heal that need to heal. And also, what can we do to help kids be healing balm, a healing balm, a healing agent, agents of change?
That's a great question, Ryan.
Let's try to get, let's try to get Jonathan as micro into the weeds as we can, like super practical. Share some thoughts on this.
Here is super practical. The word repentance means to rethink. Every young person is a master of authenticity, empathy, and being genuine with them. They emulate what is put in front of them. And if they don't detect genuine empathy, brokenness, and a crushing in the heart of their youth leader, why should we believe that they're going to become agents of healing and reconciliation? So the first and foremost, they've got to see an authentic, crushed heart from their youth leader. And again, it's not saying that we take personal responsibility for what has happened, but as a nation, we cry out to God for the hearts of our leaders and people. Sometimes they need to see their youth leader crying out for the heart of reconciliation and being a champion for justice. So that's first and foremost. If they don't see it in you, it's not just a casual acknowledgement. It is not a small, simple prayer. There are different types of prayer. There's prayers of adoration, worship. There's also prayers of intercession. We must lead them in that prayer of intercession. And then we also have to help them, as I mentioned earlier, see it from the other perspective and teach them how to understand when there are ethnic and what we call racial sensitivities around an area. think about it this way and help them explain it, that if the roles were reversed, whether if it happened to be two men that happened to have a certain ethnicity, African American, Hispanic, if they were accused of shooting a white young man or a white young woman, what would the reaction be? And sometimes helping them think about that. Well, that if they think that's wrong, then this too must be wrong. Not saying that every action or every response was wrong, but that somehow here something terrible happened, some hope was diminished, and help them to think about this in the way that Christ thinks about this. The other piece that I think is very important for youth leaders to understand is that there are oftentimes small ethnic and racial tension episodes that happen every single day. And if we don't speak to those, then it's going to be very challenging for us to speak to these horrific, heightened tragedies. Sometimes it's the young person that doesn't have the right school books, that doesn't have the right access to education, the right access to food security, the right access to healthcare. And if we're not a champion for equality in those areas, young people know that we don't have the authenticity to be a champion for these major issues of death and of sometimes, horrific standoffs and travesties of injustice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's really getting into the nitty gritty. And oftentimes we like to talk about the what, the why, the who. Oftentimes when it comes to young people, we want them to adopt the why of adults. Why should I do my homework? Well, because you know that it's going to, help you 10 years from now. They're not thinking 10 years from now. We've got to look at the why from our young people's point of view. And when it comes to areas of reconciliation, race, ethnicity, we've got to figure out, well, what motivates their why to help others? Why would they want to get involved? After all, most of them don't live in Brunswick, Georgia. Many of them have, sometimes the only Black friend or Asian friend or Hispanic friend is someone in their church. And so they don't understand how tensions can flare up. It's taking the time to understand that not everyone in the world, is a follower of Jesus. And even sometimes followers of Jesus don't always have the right teaching and upbringing and perspective on these very sensitive parts. And so just being honest with them, saying, Mom, Dad, youth leader, I don't have all the answers, but I know that God wants to heal this part. Let's pray with this and put this before Jesus.
Yeah, let's talk. That's so good. Let's hang for a second on this, what motivates their why.
Yeah.
Because that's so good. How can I help my girl, thinking about my girls at home? So 3 girls at home, 15, 10, and 6.
Yes.
How can I really help them have a heart that have that motivation to do the right thing and love someone that's different than them? At the end of the day, is it really a spiritual thing, like really praying that they understand who the Lord is and who people are, or is there more to it? Thoughts?
My thought is this: we talk about ministry.
Yeah.
Ministry meets the need. One of the most celebrated books in Christian culture is The 5 Love Languages. And man, we all love to preach Gary Chapman. Well, when it comes to ministry also has some love languages. And when it comes to certain demographics, ethnicities, there is a love language that we speak that until that love language is spoken, ministry can never go forward. And so sometimes that love language is just listening. If you ever asked a young person, especially someone that may be minority, hey, do you feel accepted here? Do you feel championed? And now those are sometimes our words, but sometimes do you feel safe? Do you feel like we love you for you? And have that conversation with someone that has a different ethnicity. And if they don't see you doing it, I can try to teach my sons how to be a firefighter all day long. But until I get them in the presence of other firefighters, my perspective is limited. And typically I'm missing the entire forest, the trees, the leaves. I'm missing it all. If they don't spend quality time listening to the hearts of other ethnicities and hearts, there's no way they could ever fully empathize, fully minister, fully pray. So we've got to be intentional about crafting those times of ministry. And it's not just, and Ryan, one of the things that I really honor about you is the fact that you have not shied away from some very hard topics. So let's just be real with a lot of youth pastors that are on here today. When you go into a lot of our churches, we're very welcoming to certain ethnicities to come and be on our worship team, to come and be in our drama team. It's not always that we welcome them to be a part of our teaching teams, that we welcome them to be a part of our leadership teams.
That's true.
And so we almost shift the narrative, or we re-emphasize societal norms when it comes to the certain viewpoints on race. Some would say that certain races are only good at sports and music. Well, how do we reinforce that? By only relegating those ethnicities to music. And then sometimes, if in a lot of our high schools, ethnicities are African Americans, they're the gym teachers, or they are the security guards. We have to really champion, and that's why I really appreciate your partnership. And even a couple of years ago, you've allowed me to be a part of MegaCon 2 years in a row. And I think that you were intentional about diversifying your speaker offering.
And we need
those things are never by accident. Those things are only intentional. And so if you really want to have that, don't invite someone that is a different ethnicity than you and your family. Go and visit them in their home if they're open to it. And just listen. Tell us what are some of the things you're scared of. How can we pray for you? Hear it from their heart, and not just one or two, because a lot of us have a friend that's Black, or a friend that's Asian, or a friend that's white. Being a part, being bi-ethnic, I would oftentimes be around groups and I would hear people say, well, all Black people are like this, and all white people are like this, all Jewish people are like this, all Christian people are like this. And anytime you're using overgeneralizations, you're missing the heart of God. Because there are smart people in every ethnicity and people that are challenged intellectually in every ethnicity. There are people that can carry a tune, people that can't. So let's get in their presence and hear what's on their heart.
That's so good and so practical. Just listen. How well am I listening? How well am I asking questions? Am I really asking questions? Do I think I'm listening, and do I think I'm asking questions, but am I really doing it? You were very kind, Jonathan, in saying that you honored me for approaching difficult topics, which aren't always easy. And I'm going to be really honest. Today this has intimidated me a little bit because it's a difficult topic. And I have a sister who is adopted. We adopted from India as a 10-month-old baby. I have cousins that are adopted from Vietnam. So I feel like we've got as a family a really huge heart for the peoples of the world in different ethnic groups. But yet when you get to a topic like this, I feel like it can be a little intimidating. And I want to talk about that for a moment. So what would you say to a kids pastor or a youth leader that is saying, yeah, you know what, this is an important topic, but Ryan, I know what you mean. It's a little intimidating. What kind of encouragement would you give them as they try to help their kids heal and be agents of healing? But yet I don't feel like I'm schooled in this topic. I don't feel real confident. Would you say that just be a good listener, or what else would you say to encourage that?
I would say it's time to be courageous. It's time to go above and beyond. And that is, it's okay to start with those that you feel safe and that you can be authentic around. So if you have 3 friends that happen to be African American, call all 3 and say, hey, talk to me like I don't know what I'm talking about, and give me a little bit more of your perspective. And then when you're talking to those in your youth ministry, start out and being very transparent, saying, listen, I don't have all the answers. All I know is that this is a very sensitive subject. Tell me what, and again, that's where you go to listening. Tell me what your friends are saying, and tell me how that makes you feel. Let's go even deeper into the onion, Ryan, for just a quick second, because I want a lot of youth pastors to understand some of the perspectives of of African Americans. I'm not saying this is all African Americans. I'm not saying this is most, but this is some.
Yep.
There are some African Americans that look at some churches, church youth groups, church leaders, and they see some of our genuine heart for the disenfranchised. We are a champion for the unborn often.
Mm-hmm.
We say that, we are pro-life. But then if we don't champion some of the causes of the that are challenging society, it doesn't lend credibility to some of those arguments, and we lose part of our opportunity to witness when people turn us off. When the Bible, when it talks about leadership, it talks about the bishopric, it says you must have a good reputation inside the church and outside of the church. When these national spotlights happen, and when we know that there is a challenge here, because I understand that you can play all angles of this particular killing. I've seen online statements like, well, if he had just followed simple commands. And of course, most African Americans say simple commands. When you are being chased with men with guns and 2 trucks, what simple commands are there? Tell me a natural inclination that you do not fear for your life. And if you expect every action to be perfect from a young person that's being chased by men with guns, and they have a history in that area of racial and ethnic tension, tell me what the proper response would be. And so it's very easy to minimize the tragedy and to victimize the victims. And when that happens, for most African Americans, you've turned them off, and what you have told them is that I support you when you stand next to me in my church and worship, but I don't support you when you are fighting for the lives of your young people, and that I'm not willing to be a good listener. I'm not saying that those are all perspectives that every African American has, but those are strong sentiments, and youth pastors have to be sensitive to that.
Sure.
And here's something that's even a little bit harder that we sometimes don't want to talk about. Unless sometimes parents hear it from the senior pastor, sometimes it does not hit home quite as much. And for every youth pastor out there, I see you and I hear you. It's not always easy to operate in that number 2 role, that number 3 role. It's not always easy, because you have sometimes what feels like 3 times the responsibility, but only sometimes 1/4 of the hearts of the people. But the senior pastor, when she or he speaks emphatically that we are going to pray earnestly and we're not going to rush to judgment, and that our hearts break for this, that sends ripples of faith and affirmation to everyone in the congregation and the community. And it says that we stand with those that are hurting, no matter what.
I love it. I love it. If you appreciate Jonathan having this conversation with me and you're watching on Facebook, why don't you push that heart button like 2 or 3 times? Jonathan, when I asked him to do this, he's very busy. But he didn't bat an eye. He said, yes, I would love to do this with you. Push that heart button on Facebook 2 or 3 times, and let's let Jonathan know how much we appreciate him having this conversation with us. Jonathan, and I would love to hear this from everyone who's watching on Facebook as well in the comments. If you know of something, someone has mentioned a Facebook group, someone has mentioned a book. Jonathan, just practically as a leader, if I want to, does any book come to mind or resource that, as a leader, I want to be more sensitive to this and I want to be an agent of change? Are there any books that come to mind, Jonathan? If not, that's okay.
No, there are. It is kind of interesting though, because one of the things that we really have to think about is where you are in your journey. Where are you in your journey of being aware and, for lack of a better word, sometimes our young people say being woke. Now that's not really a common vernacular. That was kind of like 2019, etc. But I'm just pulling up some resources for us real quick. But there are a lot of books that are out there. But what we really want to understand is, where are you? one of the books that was kind of championed recently was by an author named Ta-Nehisi Coates, Between the World and Me. I'm really talking about understanding different cultures and ethnicities. If you really want to have the conversation, then we really have to educate ourselves on some of the ethnic and racial injustices. But as a youth pastor, really what I would encourage you to do is please do read. But more than that, have the conversation. Convene a great panel and allow it to be all Asians, allow it to be all Hispanics, allow it to be all African Americans, and just let them talk. Don't ask a whole bunch of questions. Say, what do you want us to know? You're going to get some diversity of expression, and then have that senior pastor, that youth leader, come up at the end and allow those panelists to pray for that youth leader. Invite some of the young people from your community to come and speak to your youth group. Some of them are going to be ultra spiritual. Every other word is going to be Jesus. But still invite some of those that may be less churched, so that you can have honest and authentic conversation and relationship. And you will win the entire city. You will have the respect and support of others, so that when you have your Visitors Day, when you have your scholarship time, when you have all the other programs, that's when others will come and support. Here at our church, we give away scholarships to local high schools, and they don't have to be religiously affiliated. We just want to show genuine care and concern for our community. We host Healing Our Village, where we invite people that have been incarcerated to come and just tell us about that experience. Oftentimes we like to demonize those that have made mistakes, just like, unfortunately, we're seeing in the media right now. Instead of having sometimes an authentic conversation about ethnicity and race, we like to demonize the victim. So we're going back and dig up some of the past of certain victims who has nothing to do with the event of that day. So have that conversation as youth leaders. Don't be afraid. Be courageous, like God told Joshua, like God told so many in the Bible. Be courageous. You don't have to be perfect. Don't you know that God is with you? He'll smooth out all of your imperfect and sometimes race deaf or tone deaf comments. They won't remember that. They'll remember your heart. They'll remember your sincerity. More than anything, they'll remember your tears. If you have not shed a tear about this, then I would encourage you to spend a little bit more time at the altar of your heart and ask God to really break your heart with the things that break his heart. Then you'll have authentic ministry. You'll be a champion. You'll change the world, and God will be pleased.
Man, this is good. What a great wrap up. Thank you, Jonathan. I think if I was going to summarize our conversation today with 3 action words, we've talked a lot about listening. Listen. Yeah. We've talked about courage, be courageous, and have conversations. Have conversations. Yeah. 3 good words. I know there were other things tucked in there, but those are 3 that really stood out to me. Listen, be courageous, have conversations. Jonathan, you're a dear friend and a blessing. I've already, since we've been on the coffee chat, I've been texting your pastor, Dr. Smith, saying, "Guess who I'm online with?" And he's so proud of you. He's a great man and a great pastor.
Really,
and
we don't do people worship. We don't try to take any of God's glory, but we do have a special leader. We have a prepared leader. We have a leader that is authentic, and God has raised up to be a champion for the kingdom. The kingdom has to be a champion for all, the least of these.
Amen.
And so often as youth leaders, I want to say God bless you to everyone that does missions work, that supports initiatives in South America, Haiti, Africa. But just remember, the Bible says that judgment must first begin at the house of God. We've got to deal with our home issues so that we don't need missionaries from South America and Africa and Canada to come and teach us how to have better relationships in our own community. And sometimes it seems like that. As a matter of fact, you're probably aware of this, that a lot of trends are now that people from other countries are coming and using America as a mission field. They're coming to our cities
That's true.
and trying to be a champion for evangelism. We've got to do that. Thank God for Bishop Smith. Thank God for you, Ryan. Thank God for Kidmin Nation. Thank God for all that you're doing. We continue to pray with you, and we do love you a lot.
Thank you, Jonathan. Give Dr. Smith a hug from Ryan Frank the next time you see him. And Jonathan's website is jonathanbanks.org.
Yes.
Andy's already put that in the comments once, but maybe you can drop that again and again.
Sure.
You can learn more about Jonathan and his ministry and his book, jonathanbanks.org. Jonathan, I love you, brother. Thank you for having this conversation with me.
Thank you. Praying for you and your family. You're doing great work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me all the Kidmin leaders.
Will do. Thank you, brother. What a great coffee chat. What a great conversation. Thank you for all the comments on Facebook that I've been scrolling through. Tracy, yes, it was a great conversation. Several of you have mentioned books and Facebook groups in the comments. Thank you for doing that, Mandy. Thank you for doing that, Christine. Thank you, Jasmine. Jasmine is going to be with me tomorrow. I think it's tomorrow or Friday, on the coffee chat. I told you tomorrow we're going to have several members of I Love Kidmin that are going to jump on. We're going to have a conversation. Thank you. Good to see Peter Kobe. What's up, Peter Kobe? Good to see you on here. Kylie, thank you. Sarah Kaufman, thank you for joining us. Yvonne Alexander, blessings to you. Thank you for the thumbs up. Great chat. I've enjoyed today's coffee chat. Thank you so much for being with me. If you have a question for the coffee chat, please text the number right there, 833-792-6372. If you have someone that you think I ought to have on as a guest, or if you would like to join me, just text that. Don't call that number. Give it a text, 833-792-6372. I Love Kidmin. You ready for a great day? Couple things. We are wrapping up the next issue of Kids Matter magazine. I don't have one in the studio here with me to show you, but we're wrapping it up. We are running a little bit behind on this issue. Our creative department is running a little bit behind, so we're going to be a week or two late getting this issue out the door, but you should get it the beginning of June. Now's the time to subscribe. If you don't subscribe to Kids Matter magazine, this is not a digital magazine. It is a print and digital magazine. So this is something that you get in the mail. Go to kidsmatter.com, put a Z in there, KIDZMATTER.com. We've been printing Kids Matter magazine for 15 years. And I think it's a pretty good magazine. It's created for people who are working with kids and families in the church. Great articles. Discover some great resources. We do a lot of fun things in the magazine, and it looks really, really cool on a coffee table. Kids Matter magazine has won a few awards over the years for design, which we're pretty proud of. And hey, if you're a Kidmin leader, what better to have sitting on your desk or your coffee table than Kids Matter magazine? Go subscribe to Kids Matter magazine. We also have some new downloads at kidsmatter.com. We have some brand new games this week, some brand new resources for families this week, new stuff even being added today. So be checking out kidsmatter.com. To all of you new students in Kidmin Academy, you're in day 2 of Kidmin Academy. Class officially began yesterday. It's our largest class in Kidmin Academy history. I want to welcome you to Kidmin Academy. It's going to be a great 12-month journey together. Finally, if you've missed a coffee chat, all the coffee chats are on my YouTube. If you go to ryanfrank.com, you'll see a link to my YouTube channel. We also are putting the coffee chats on my podcast, Leadership with Ryan Frank, or the Ryan Frank podcast. Wow. The Leadership with Ryan Frank was the name of my podcast like 22 years ago, I think. The Ryan Frank podcast, all the links to my social media are at ryanfrank.com. You can catch all of our daily coffee chats there, along with a lot of other great content to help you grow as a children's ministry leader. Thanks for joining me for today's daily coffee chat. Can't wait to see you again tomorrow. Have a great day.